Good afternoon. This is an encore presentation of the fiscal year 2024 State Aid for Library Construction Info Session that was originally held on Tuesday, January 31st. As I go through the slides, if you have any questions, my contact information is at the end. So please reach out at programs@owl.org. And I'm going to take you through the timeline for anyone applying in this construction aid cycle. If you are applying next year or a year after, just add a year onto all the dates and the approximate timeline to give you an idea of when you would need to do different tasks for your project. So again, while this is centered around 2024, you're able to kind of shift everything ahead and project for your library when you are ready to apply. So State Aid for Library Construction, it is part of the annual budget each year from the state. So when we do Advocacy Day, and there's those two things that we're kind of asking library supporters to advocate for. One is regular library aid, and one is this State Aid for Library Construction. Library construction is bonded through the Dormitory Authority of New York State. So a lot of times through the process, you'll hear us use DASNY. And then it's administered by the New York State Division of Library Development. So you'll hear DLD a lot through the 23 public library systems. So all of the library systems in New York State have somebody there designated to help facilitate this process. And I am that person at the OWL Library System. So when you are working through a construction aid project, I will liaise between your library and the Division of Library Development to make everything go really smooth for you. Projects that are eligible for state aid for library instruction include increased effectiveness of library services due to increased and/or improved building space and capacity. So that could be an expansion, a renovation, or even a new building. Efficient utilization of the building, such as areas as energy conservation and increased staff efficiency, improved access to and use of building services by all library users, including those with disabilities. Provisions of library services to geographically isolated or economically disadvantaged communities, and the total project cost must be at least $5,000. And what are eligible costs? New construction, reconstruction, restoration, rehabilitation, and remodeling. You cannot include any kind of basic or routine repairs or maintenance. Those cannot be included. So when you are applying, keep that in mind that it needs to be reconstruction, restoration, rehabilitation, remodeling, and not repair. Broadband installation, site acquisition, lands with or without existing structures, and equipment and furnishings within the context of an eligible construction project. So for example, if you are adding a children's room onto your library, you can buy furniture and equipment to fill that space, but you can't just buy equipment and furnishings. Same thing with like flooring or carpeting. If you are building, renovating, or building an expansion, you can carpet or put down new floor, but you can't just replace the library's carpet without it being part of a larger project. Other eligible costs include electric generators, permanent signage, security systems, accessible entranceways, doors and ramps, and bathrooms, assistive listening devices and systems, and the supervision and management of projects. So what isn't eligible? Maintenance and repair activities, which I mentioned, new carpet, flooring, painting, unless required by construction, mold abatement as a standalone, equipment with a useful life of less than 6 years. So again, DLD and DASNY want to fund projects that are going to be long-term and sustainable. So if you want to put something in your new children's room that only has a useful life of 2 years, they're not going to approve that expense. That would be something that you would purchase on your own. Landscaping, unless it's required by the construction, asbestos survey only, books and other library materials, software licensing, speculative architectural and engineering plans, and building consultant feasibility studies. So none of these would be eligible costs. If you're not sure from these two lists what's eligible and what's not, just reach out again by email, and I will help you figure out if your project is eligible to go forward. So the OWL Library System priorities this year, we would really like to see projects that improve access to and use of building services by all library users, including those with disabilities. So when the ADA laws came in 1991, a lot of our buildings were grandfathered in, but that was really meant to just give libraries time to get their spaces up and in compliance with ADA. It wasn't really meant to be something permanent. So we really like to see more of our buildings adding, automatic doorways, ramps, larger bathroom entranceways. So we would love to see some ADA projects coming in this year. And provisions of library services to geographically isolated or economically disadvantaged communities. That doesn't mean other projects cannot apply, but we would really like to give priority to these types of projects. So aid funding. Libraries may receive up to 50% of the total project approved costs, or up to 75% if your library meets the criteria for serving an economically disadvantaged community, or up to 90% if your library meets the criteria for serving an economically distressed community. So all libraries in New York State are eligible to receive up to 50%. Currently, all libraries in the OWL library system are eligible to receive up to 75%, and a handful of our libraries are eligible to up to 90%. So we will help you with this process when we are going through what your award funding is going to be, but aid amounts are not guaranteed until the final approval by DASNY. And even if you are eligible for up to these amounts, it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get them. It depends largely on how competitive the grant cycle is. That's how many libraries apply and what their total project costs are going to be, and what that state aid for library construction is going to look like how much we're going to be getting from New York State. So just an example of how what we get from New York State can impact your project amount. The 5-year history, you can see there was a lot of consistency between 2019 and 2020, and then we received a tremendous cut in state aid for library construction. It was almost 1/3 of what we usually get, and then we had a little bit of a bounce back. Right now, we're not sure what we're going to be getting until April when the governor submits the final budget. But, we're hoping it's going to be flat funding, something in that $900,000 range, but we cannot guarantee it. And that's why we can't say you're going to get 75%. Again, it depends on what they give us from New York State, and then also how many applications come in and what the total project costs on all those applications are. For the 2024 program cycle, it runs from July 1st, 2023 to June 30th, 2029. So even though you're going to be applying in 2023 and activities can start in 2023, the construction cycle goes by the year that you get the money. So that's why we're calling it the 2024 program cycle. Only expenditures made after July 1st, 2023 are eligible for reimbursement under this program. So anything that you purchase now will not be able to qualify. However, you could count it as part of your match funds, and we'll talk about match funds a little bit later. And no expenditures made prior to January 1st can be included in the application. So we have a system timeline here, and we have the intent to apply, which I'll talk about again a little bit more later on. But the intent to apply is a little form that you're going to tell us what your project is, what those priorities are, a brief narrative, and a brief budget. And that's due to me by May 26, 2023. So we need proof of available funds and contractor quotes sent along with that. And that's going to be sent via email to me after you submit the form. On June 14th, our construction aid committee and board meetings will take place, and that's where funding amounts will be approved. And then we will let libraries know the next day, this is what your award is going to be, what aid you're going to receive for your project. And then you have a week to affirm that you are going to move forward with your project, and you could begin your full applications at this time. So we give you a week to decide, because sometimes funding comes in exactly what you wanted it to be, and sometimes funding is a little bit less. So if you were really hoping to get 75% and we are only able to offer your project 60%, you have to decide if you can move forward or not and let us know. And libraries moving forward must renew SAM and must start SHPO at this time. And I'll go over SAM and SHPO in some slides coming up as well. So your intent to apply. To complete this form, you need a brief description of the project, an approximate timeline of the project, contractor quote or quotes with total project costs, and proof of available funds. So this information will be submitted by be used by the Owl Library System Construction Aid Committee to determine eligibility and the level of funding for your library. So this form will be available on Monday, February 6th on the Construction Aid docs page, and the deadline to complete this form is May 26th. Proof of available funds. This is verification in form of a bank or bond certification, an official document signed by a financial authority connected with the applying institution, and or such other evidentiary documents as necessary. So what can you use for available funds? It could be New York Economic Development Program grants, utility solar company incentives, private funds, friends groups, library donations. You cannot use money that's bonded through a municipality or school district. So if your municipality is going to be putting up a bond to help fund this, you cannot then also apply for construction aid because that money is also bonded. Match funds. The construction aid program is not a dollar-to-dollar match. So if it's not, you're applying for 10,000 and you need to put up 10,000. It's a percentage match. So if your library receives 25% in aid funds, you must provide 75% in matching funds. If your library receives 47% of aid funds, you must provide 53% in matching funds. If your library receives 71% of aid funds, you must provide 29% of matching funds. Okay, SHPO. So the State Historic Preservation Office is part of New York State Office of Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation. The mission of SHPO is to help communities identify, evaluate, preserve, and revitalize their historic and cultural resources. So if your library building is 50 years or older and the project involves ground disturbance and or demolition, you must get an approval letter from SHPO. If you are unsure if your project is exempt, because there are some things that are exempt from getting a SHPO letter, you should still apply anyway. And I can help you decide if there's something called Appendix A. And so I can help you decide if your project is listed on this appendix and then you are exempt from getting the letter from SHPO. But sometimes if we're really not sure, or if it's kind of like on the edge, I'll say just apply for SHPO anyway. Like, let's just be safe. You go onto the website, the link here is at the bottom. You click online tools, you fill out a form and you submit it. And then a little while later, not that day, but a little while later, you'll get a letter back. And most times the letter is like, okay, this has been approved by SHPO, you can go ahead. And you'll attach that letter in your construction aid application. A few times SHPO will come back and they'll just ask for a little bit more information just to make sure that you're not, ruining the integrity of your historical building. But then after you give them more information, they're like, okay, this is approved. So it's a simple process just to go through it, just to make sure your project is okay and nothing's going to get held up. If SHPO does have some questions about your project, that could take a little bit longer, which is why we recommend working on SHPO sooner rather than later. If your full application to me is due September 1st, do not start working on your SHPO August 15th. Again, once you decide on June 22nd, yes, you are moving ahead, I would start your SHPO then. So again, back to the system timeline. On September 1st, 2023, the full state aid for library construction applications are due to me here. So you'll affirm to me on June 22nd, yes, we're going to move ahead. You can then go into the online portal and begin your application. I will be doing a portal training of the following week, so the last week of June. So anyone who hasn't used the construction aid portal or hasn't used it in a long time, I would recommend attending that training, and I'll walk you through how you use the portal, how you fill out the application, how you add your attachments. But this is due to me September 1st. And the reason it's due September 1st is it takes me a full month to do the review of all the applications. I go through everyone's application line by line. I check every single one of their attachments, and we make sure that when we send everything to the state, it's in the best shape it could be. The state will always come back with questions for us, and that's okay, and that's normal because sometimes criteria and wording can shift from year to year, but I do need everything to me by September 1st, and that is a hard deadline. On September 14th, final aid notifications are sent to libraries. This is where your dollar amount may adjust a little bit in case a library project had to pull out. It would never decrease at this point. It could increase or it may stay the same, but this is where you'll get a final aid notification. And then I'll finish up the applications and I will submit them all to DLD. And those are usually due very late in September or very early October. I haven't gotten my deadline for that yet. Now, this part's an estimated timeline because these are some dates that we've seen fluctuate over the past couple of years. And this is where it's really left up to the Division of Library Development and DASNY for this process to move along. But in the winter of 2023, spring of 2024, DLD will begin to review those applications that I submitted in the fall, and then they'll send them to DASNY for approval. During this review, like I said, we may get some notes back or some questions or some edits that we need to do from DLD. That is totally normal. It doesn't mean you did anything wrong in your application, but sometimes they just have some additional questions. They want to make sure that your application is eligible and it's clear that it's eligible when it goes to DASNY for funding. They don't want anything to get sent back or rejected by DASNY. In late summer, early fall of 2024, libraries will be notified that their application was approved after the DASNY review. So you'll get an email sent to you and your legislators will be notified because a lot of times our legislators who advocate for this funding like to put out a press release. So you'll get an email, sometimes these have come in August, sometimes these have come in October. Again, it's been a little flexible the past couple of years. And then in late fall, early winter of 2024, you'll receive your initial payment of 90% of your total aid amount. So if your library was awarded $100,000, at this time, you will get $90,000. The initial $10,000 will be allocated to your library when you close out your project. So that's just something to be mindful of when you're planning and budgeting. And then you will have 6 years to close out your project, which is a difference now. These used to be 3-year grant cycles, and then it kind of became 4-year during COVID. And then the legislation was signed that libraries have 6 years to complete these projects. You don't have to take 6 years. You can close it out right away. But if you need it, that time is there for you. So on June 30th, 2029, all of these projects should be closed out. Once you close out, which I'll talk a little bit more in an upcoming slide, that final $10,000 or 10%, whatever your funding level is, will be dispersed to your library. A way to get your money a little bit faster, since sometimes we aren't quite sure when that money is going to come in, is to register for the electronic funds transfer and skip the paper checks. So if you're waiting a really long time, that money finally comes in, you can get it like a week or two faster if your library is registered for the electronic funds transfer. So that is something I would recommend you do and move away waiting for those paper checks from the state. There's also going to be progress reports that you'll have to complete. These are very simple. Currently at the 3-year mark and every year thereafter, this may change, but right now it's at the 3-year mark and every year thereafter, you're going to get an email from DLD if your project has not been closed out. You must respond to the email with a brief update of your project. Don't ignore this email. You have to respond to it and just tell them where your project is. Like currently we are breaking ground or materials have been purchased. But if you're not sure, again, reach out to me and I'll help you with that email. Close out. Like I said, projects may close out anytime prior to June 30th, 2029. You do not have to take the full 6 years. When your project is completed, you'll enter your final expenses and upload a post-project photo or photos on one document and labeled in the portal and submit. It's the same portal you used for your application. Final expenses must use all awarded funds. So for some reason, which is very rare, but it happens, your project came in at a little bit less money and you didn't spend all your award funds, you have to spend your award funds. So at that point, you'll reach out to me and we will be in contact with DLD about doing a project amendment and you add something else to your project. DLD will review your paperwork and once approved, they will request what is called FS10F forms. Don't send these forms until DLD requests them. Sometimes this closeout process does take a long time. It depends on the time of year that you close out. You may close out when they're reviewing the whole new crop of applications, so it's going to take a little bit longer. You might catch them at a little bit of a downtime during construction aid, and your closeout paperwork will be processed quickly. But they will reach out to you, don't worry. Again, there might be some questions. They might want another photograph. They might have a question about, the expenses that you entered. Again, this is totally normal. There's a little bit of back and forth. The closeout process can be tricky at times, or it can be smooth. It just really depends on if you have to change any parts of your project. And then once they request those FS10Fs, you'll sign them in blue ink, send them off, and that remaining 10% will be sent to you, either paper check or electronically. It's important to consider timing. So you need to collect a project bid or quote figures. You cannot use architect's estimates. This is because a lot of times architect estimates end up being a lot lower than what projects cost, and then libraries are left scrambling. They don't have the money. They have to scale down their project a lot. So DLD needs to see project bids or quote figures from a contractor. You need to have your SHPO letter if your building is 50 years or older. You need to do your System for Award Management or SAM registration, or it's also right now you're hearing UEI registration renewal. This process sometimes is very, very smooth. You just go on to your SAM account and you just re-register, you get your new expiration date, we're good to go. This past year, when they switched from using DUNS to UEI, there has been a little bit, a couple snafus. If your library ever had a formal name change, some libraries are having to start the SAM registration all over again from the beginning rather than just doing a renewal. If you're not sure if your library has ever registered for SAM, most of our libraries have, so you will need to renew, but there's some that haven't. Just reach out and we can look that up for you. You need to do your assurances, and this has to be signed at a board meeting. So this is a form that you print off from your application portal, and it needs to be signed at a board meeting. So if this is due to me on September 1st and your board does not meet in August, then it needs to be on your July agenda. So just consider the timing of that, because that September 1st deadline is a hard deadline. So I need the assurances signed at a board meeting and uploaded to the portal by September 1st. You need a certificate of tenure lease or legal agreement if you do not own the building. The state is no longer accepting open-ended agreements. So some of you do have agreements that say, oh, the library can use this building forever, but it doesn't have any dates in there. And those used to be accepted. But in the past couple of years, DLD is now requesting a letter from whoever owns your building stating that the library will have use of the space for 10 years from completion of the project. So not 10 years from application. So 10 years from completion of the project needs to be in that letter. So if your construction project takes 4 years to complete, it's really like 14 years that you have to have use of the building. And that's because they don't want to fund a construction aid project for a library and then a library loses the building 2 years later. This money is meant to fund library spaces. You need before photos. Again, these all have to be on one document. This is a change. Before you would upload them individually. And the reason for this change is each construction cycle, DLD gets over 200 construction applications, and many of those applications have like 10 to 12 photos each. So that's a lot of individual photos to click on and open, and it really slows that review process down. So by putting all of your before photos on a Word document and labeling each, it's really helpful to both me when I'm reviewing, to DLD when they're reviewing, and to DASNY when they're approving. And make sure you are labeling those photos. We have gotten pictures, it's just like a piece of, like, it's a grass, it's like a plot of land, but we're not quite sure what it is. So labeling it like this is where the extension to the children's room is going to be is very helpful, again, in reviewing and approving your project. And again, you need those proof of available funds. So you need to upload something to the application portal that says we can come up with our match funds. Here are our match funds, we have them. You cannot say, oh, we're gonna fundraise the rest. So if you have to have $50,000 in match funds, you have to show that with those proof of available funds by September 1st. You can't show some and say you're gonna get the rest. And again, this is to make sure that you have the money to complete the project. DLD doesn't want you to run out of money because you were hoping you were going to fundraise and that fundraising goal fell a little short. You have to have the proof of available funds for this project, what your match funds are, by September 1st. And it's also really important to have a facilities plan. So there's some links to this on the docs page that I'll show you. But planning 2, 3, 5 years ahead for your library is really helpful, especially with construction aid. So you can really forecast what your library building needs and how that funding is going to work out for you. Other important reminders and updates. You may start your project July 1st, but you cannot complete your project before September 2nd. And the reason for that is that all the applications are due to me by September 1st. So projects can't be completed before the application deadline to the system. That's just DLD's rule. So you could start July 1st. If you're doing a roofing project, do not have them put that final nail in until September 2nd. Projects must start within 180 days of your official award notification. So that's that email that you're going to get from the state that says your project was approved by DASNY, and you must start within 180 days. And this could just be you had someone purchase supplies. Like, it doesn't have to be, you're breaking ground yet, but some activities need to start. The OWL library system is your liaison to DLD. Do not email DLD directly unless they email you. And this is at the request of DLD. Again, they're doing over 200 projects per year. So now with 6-year cycles, they are dealing with a massive amount of projects. We're talking over 1,000 projects they're managing. So if all of those libraries are emailing DLD individually about their projects, it just really slows everything down. So you will email me and I will reach out to our liaison and get you the information that you need. Anytime you send an email about your project to me, you need to include the project number. This is also an update. For these projects, the number will be 038624, and then when you start in the portal, you get those 4 more numbers, and just include that in the subject line. Because the grant cycle is now 6 years, we're going to be managing here at the system quite a few projects, and again, this will help us stay organized. Especially, we do have some libraries that have multiple projects going at the same time, so they have a 2021, a 2022, a 2023. So if you email me a question, I know exactly which project you're talking about. You're talking about your 2023 project. All pre and post project photos must be on one document. I'm emphasizing this a few times through the presentation because it's something that DLD is really strongly, not, I don't want to say requesting, but requiring, must be on one document. It can be Word or PDF and labeled. Keep project titles and narratives simple. You don't have to include your library's entire history, although it's a wonderful, rich history, they don't need it here. Keep everything simple. Bullet points is great. Project titles, say exactly what it is. You don't have to say it's so-and-so library expansion beautification project. You can just be like new HVAC. And I will go through during the review process here at the system, and I might take stuff out. If I take stuff out because I think it kind of makes things confusing, or it makes things too long, or it's just information that they don't really need, don't go back and add it in. If you see that your project's been edited in the portal, just leave it as is. The documents that you need to send to me have to be signed in blue ink. Please do not staple them together because before I mail them, I have to scan them in. And keep all of your invoices and financial paperwork. This is important because if you ever get audited by the OSC, your construction aid project could be included in that. So it's really important to keep all of your invoices and financial paperwork, and just take a look at your records retention policy. So here are those resources that I was telling you about. And you can see we do have this construction aid program page. And it has a program overview, the timeline that I just talked about during the presentation, the intent to apply form, you click here and fill it out. And then again, you have to email me those proof of available funds and contractor quotes. Has some system resources here. So the slides from this presentation, this recording will be there, and then the facilities planning for your library. And if you have questions on facilities planning, please reach out to Ron Kersot. There's additional state resources, some recent changes to the program, and then updates from DLD. So this page has all of the information you need. However, if there's something here that you'd have a question on that's not covered or it seems unclear to you, please reach out to me. That is exactly what I'm here for. I'm here to help facilitate this program, again, so it goes as smooth as possible and your library receives the funding that it needs to renovate, expand, and move forward. So this is my contact information. Again, Suzanne McCauley, Program Director at OWL.org. You could also email me at programs@owl.org. And then my phone number is 585-394-8260, and I'm at extension 1106. Any questions that you have on the construction aid program, I am here to help you with, so please reach out. And if you have any questions before that intent to apply is due, whether or not your project is eligible, you can go ahead and reach out to me. Additionally, if you're not sure, because you have a couple little projects, but none of them quite equal $5,000, sometimes we can bundle those up into one application, and then you would be eligible. Because we're only supposed to submit one application per library per cycle anyway, a lot of times we can put those little smaller projects together and then get you into that construction aid program. So thank you all for watching this recording. Please reach out again if you have any questions, and I'm happy to help. Have a great day.